Everybody for coming to this panel this morning on greening athletics. It's very exciting to me to see this happening because it was just an idea in my head that I would like to see this at one of ASHE's conferences. We focus on every sector of higher education, and I thought, we haven't paid much attention to a large sector on campus, athletics. And fortunately, Jeff Orleans had been emailing and calling me about partnering with ASHE on beginning to promote the greening of athletics, and I thought, perfect, you can organize the panel for the conference. And it was ironic that it was me who helped with this because I really know very little about athletics, and Jeff did a wonderful job explaining it all to me. So I'm really pleased that this has come together and that we have a focus now on this very important topic on campuses. And if you're interested in it, there's another session tomorrow that you can go to. It's the morning session, 10 to 11:30, called Tree Huggers and Jocks, Greening Athletics at Middlebury College. And that's in room 121. So with this session today, which is sponsored by NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, we're going to have a panel presentation and followed by an audience participation conversation. We want to talk about the challenges and opportunities in greening intercollegiate athletics. The panel will illustrate current initiatives from campuses and in the NCAA's national office, including efforts with NCAA corporate partners, and will suggest areas in which campus sustainability offices and athletic offices can enhance their work together. This is intended to bring sustainability and athletics officers together to talk with each other about specific areas for closer campus cooperation and or where greater NCAA involvement might be helpful. So this conversation can go on to topics like special characteristics of athletic facilities, how athletics events presents green outreach, opportunities for campuses, and the contributions of food service and recycling at athletic events, and such other topics. So I'm going to introduce the moderator for this session, and that's Jeff Orleans. He is the co-chair of the NCAA's Green Team, which includes both NCAA staff and representatives of the NCAA's member schools and conferences. And the Green Team is charged with bringing greater sustainability to both NCAA administrative and championship activities and other activities, and with developing ways to share sustainability best practices and resources throughout collegiate athletics. And ASHE is proud to be collaborating with NCAA on that effort to share these resources. Jeff retired on July 1st after 25 years as Executive Director of the Council of Ivy Group Presidents and Commissioners of the Ivy League. And this is the nation's broadest-based Division I athletic conference. I now know Division I and athletic conferences. Jeff served on numerous NCAA governance committees and also has been active in the National Association of College and University Attorneys, which named him a fellow in 1999. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Orleans.
Thank you, Judy, very much, and good morning, everyone. It's interesting the way different participants in a conversation see the conversation differently. I saw my conversation with Judy as my calling with some trepidation and saying, do you think ASHE would be interested in having an athletics panel in September? And Judy's saying, well, I was about to call and see if you would be willing to do that. So we're very, very happy to be here. The NCAA has over 1,000 member institutions and conferences and colleges and 95 different conferences across the country. We're the broadest intercollegiate athletics association in the country, and we're very pleased to welcome you here today. We're especially pleased to be here today on the same day that the Secretary General's Climate Change Conference begins at the United Nations in New York, because we see sport as a global activity, as providing a global opportunity for sustainability and greenness around the world and in every different kind of culture and society. And we hope that athletics in the United States can become a leader in doing that at our colleges and universities. What we hope to do this morning is to introduce you, as Judy said, to intercollegiate athletics through three different speakers who have very different backgrounds in athletics and in sustainability, and who will talk for probably half an hour total, I hope no more than that, about work that they have done on various campuses to try and change practices or policies or facilities in ways that would be more sustainable. And to talk especially about what worked and what didn't work in dealing with their campus colleagues, dealing with student athletes, dealing with the financial folks, dealing with the engineering folks, in trying to move from where they were to where they wanted to be in being greener. And we hope those examples will give you a sense of how athletics works if you don't already have that sense, and will help you think about how on your campus athletics and the greater campus can work more closely together, not only in making athletics green, but in making the whole campus green. Athletics is, as all of you know, a front porch for any institution which sponsors it, whether it's a Division 1A institution that reaches around the world on the World Wide Web, or a small Division 3 institution that has a much more local constituency. People view athletics as the face and the image of the institution in ways that they often don't attribute to any other activity. And so we feel that for that reason, and because of the energy of our student athletes who are very, very interested in becoming more sustainable and are often already leaders on their campuses in sustainability, greening athletics provides an opportunity both to help the campus become greener and to help the campus promote its green intentions to its community, its alumni, and its other different publics. So we will have, as I said, three different presentations. We hope to take no more than half an hour. And then we hope to have a long conversation all together that will talk about the challenges we feel athletics faces, the challenges you feel athletics faces, the ways that you feel athletics might be more productive or might work better on campus. Our hope is to take today's conversation back to our member institutions and conferences and give them some suggestions for how to work more closely with their sustainability colleagues on campus as they change over the next few years. We also want to take the lessons we learned today and apply them to NCAA activities. We run 88 championships at something like 800 campus sites every year involving almost 60,000 athletes. Most of those sites are on campus, and so the greener we can make those activities, the more we can teach our campuses, our athletic departments, about how to make championships and other events greener, and the more we can learn from them. It's a great opportunity for us to lead in a national way. We've done some interesting things in NCAA compliance and administrative activities that we think have great promise for being greener, and we'd like to take those lessons back to our campuses and our conferences. And so we expect to learn a lot from you today, and we have a number of NCAA events in the next 4 months that will focus on sustainability, and today is really an important piece for us in preparing for those events and in learning from you. So let me now introduce my three colleagues. I'll introduce them all at once and then ask them to speak in order, and when we're concluded, we'll have questions and conversation for as long as you're willing, and I hope that we're able to provoke some thought and an interesting conversation. Our first speaker sitting in the middle to my right is Paige Cotton, who is the Theodore M. Katula Director of Athletics and Recreational Sports and Professor of Kinesiology at DePauw University. DePauw is a 175-year-old private liberal arts institution with about 2,300 students. It's located about 45 miles west of us in Greencastle, Indiana, and it sponsors 21 intercollegiate men's and women's teams in the NCAA's Division 3. Sitting to my far right, your far left, is Steve Simmerman, who is Assistant Athletics Director at Purdue University, which is Indiana's great land-grant university, and it's located also close to Indianapolis in the small city of West Lafayette. Purdue has 72,000 headcount students and 50,000 full-time undergraduates. It sponsors 20 men's and women's sports in the Big Ten Conference, which is in the football bowl division, of the NCAA Division I, which is the most visible of our competitive levels. So in Steve and Paige, you have representatives of two wonderful, very active, very athletically involved institutions with very different athletic challenges, very different engineering and financial and sustainability challenges, located probably 45 minutes apart. And finally, to my immediate right is Bill Browne, Jr., a LEED certified architect who is the founding principal of Ratio Architects, headquartered here in Indianapolis. And Bill is also the lead architect on the wonderful expansion of this convention center, which is occurring all around us as we speak. Bill's experience in designing and adapting varsity and recreational athletic facilities focuses on both environmental sustainability and the roles that athletic facilities and activities play within the larger campus. And so while Steve and Paige will talk from personal experience about specific campuses, Bill will provide a perspective that embraces a number of different campuses and a number of different kinds of projects. And after the three of them have presented, I'll come back and moderate what I hope will be a good conversation for all of us in the time we have left. So with that, Paige, if you would begin, and if you want to come up here instead of being down there, whatever you like.
It's a tough question. I think I'll sit right here, if that's okay. First of all, I want to say that it's quite an honor for me to be here, but I don't want you to think in any way, shape, or form that I'm any kind of an expert on this topic. Basically, Jeff has challenged me, as he's challenged these other panelists, to think about what we do on our campuses or in design, as Ratio Architects have done over the years. And as I was thinking about the challenge that Jeff put in front of me, I was thinking back to my years growing up and living in a home where both my parents lived through the Depression. And I remember my mother doing some things that were really kind of strange to me. You know the twisties that go on bread wrappers? My mother would save those twisties to reuse again. She would use the bags that bread went into to reuse those for something else rather than just to throw it away. And I thought to myself, my mother must know something that I'm not really quite aware of. You know, now that my mom and dad are no longer here, I think that they really made a great impression on me, and in many ways I think that's kind of laid the groundwork for me in terms of how I approach my position as Director of Athletics. Let me talk about just a couple of things that we've done at DePauw that I think you might find exciting. You might find something that you might be able to take back to your campus. First of all, let me talk about travel in our conference and travel with our athletic programs. We have made great strides in terms of making every effort to put teams together. What I mean by that is we want to put our men's and women's soccer team in the same bus and have them travel to the same site. We do that with cross country, we do that with men's and women's basketball, we do that with men's and women's swimming, we do that with track and field. And at first it was a cost-saving venture, but now it's become very clear that it's reducing our carbon footprint. It also has allowed us to use safer vehicles. In other words, we can put two teams into a 54-passenger bus as opposed to one team traveling maybe in two vans or something not nearly as safe. But there are a couple of other things that have occurred that I didn't really realize would happen. Besides the fact that we reduced our carbon footprint, we also have made some cost savings. We've created a social environment for our student athletes that does not include alcohol. And there has to be an interaction there between our student athletes, men and women, that is very positive. It also has increased the respect between the genders in terms of preparation for playing matches or games. So I think that in addition to reducing the carbon footprint, it's been very productive. I won't say that this has come easy. I'm currently in conversations with our baseball and softball coaches, and as you can imagine, there's some resistance. And of course, the softball coach says to me, well, we can't travel with baseball. They play double headers, and they take 4 hours, and our game's over in 2 hours. Well, those are that's the kind of resistance that, we didn't sit down and talk through that issue. But, one of the things that I would say to the softball coach is that, well, do you want to play a full schedule, or do we reduce your schedule because you're reluctant to travel with the baseball team? There's some ways to deal with that in a way that start to make sense. And I think for me, it's a matter of sitting down and having that conversation and getting the coaches to understand that, doing things the way we've done in the past isn't satisfactory as we move forward. The other area that I want to just mention briefly, and I think this is going to be something that for me is a lot easier, is the communication on campus. I have very direct communication with our facilities people, and because of that, we interact and talk about a number of different things that I think promote sustainability. And just to give you a couple of examples, we're using environmental friendly field paint. We are when we have home matches, I've talked to our physical plant people and say, you don't need to cut the grass on the entire venue. All you need to do is cut the playing surface. And there's also conversations about how you maintain fields in the summer versus how you maintain fields during the playing season. And those conversations have been very positive. And they're not just one-way conversations. I had the director of physical plant come up to me a year and a half ago, and he says, Paige, we'd like to put waterless urinals into the indoor tennis and track center. What do you think? I said, absolutely, let's try it. So our facility was the first on campus to try that. They now have gone into our union building and maybe some other places on campus. So I guess what I'm saying is that any communication that you can foster between athletics and also the physical plant or facilities people is going to be a big plus. Silos in higher education are everywhere, and the more you can do to break those silos down regarding sustainability, I think is a real positive thing. I do want to recognize some DePauw people that are here. Carol Steele, here from DePauw, leading our sustainability challenge on campus. Steve Santos, Director of Food Services, and also Missy, our fifth-year student, who's doing just a wonderful job and spent a lot of time working on our carbon footprint. With that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague. You want to get up?
Thank you, Paige. Great comments. I'm going to talk about a couple of things that we've got going on at Purdue that one of which involves game day recycling. And as Jeff pointed out early on, part of what we are talking about, part of what we're discussing today is not only what works but what doesn't work. And when I talk about game day recycling at Purdue, we started out primarily with football games. That's where we have our large volume of people, anywhere from 50 to 65,000 at one game on the weekend, and a huge amount of trash being generated. So in 2006, 2007, 1999 and 2000, in 1999 and 2000, our university trash services folks came to us and wanted to know if we wouldn't be interested in starting a recycling program. And so we agreed that we could do that, and we worked with them to get some recycling containers, get a recycling trailer brought up to the football stadium area on game day Saturday and so on, and we sat some containers out in the concourse area and so on, and they were clearly marked that they were recyclables and so on, and different than, and look different than the trash containers. And so after the first game, we had literally about 100 pounds of recyclables, not impressive at all. And we were having to handle it separately. We were having to devote more energy, more time, more effort with our staff crews to keep that trash separate. And after about 3 games, we got up to about 200 pounds. And we said, you know what? We're spending a lot of time, a lot of effort, and this isn't working. So we're not going to do it anymore. And we dropped the program. We didn't make another stab at that. We didn't make another effort to do that until early in 2007. We had a new student group on campus called the Boiler Green Initiative. And a very assertive, very aggressive student group that were interested in doing green projects and getting something accomplished on campus that would really be kind of a trademark sustainability effort for them. And so they came to us with an idea about recycling. And, you know, our initial reaction was, well, we've been down this road before, and it didn't work. And they said, well, we understand that, but we want to do it a little differently. What we would like to do is just take 2 games, and we will have our students that are members of our groups actually go out through the parking lots where people are tailgating, where people are enjoying some time before the game, and we'll take recycling bags and we'll collect the recycling ourselves. And then we will keep it separate, and we will tally the amounts that we get, and so on. So we said, okay, well, you know, we think we can do that, but what's our part in it then, other than that? And they said, well, we want to write a grant so that we can get some equipment, some materials, bags, stands for to hold the bags and so on that were separate, creating recyclable containers and so on. So we said, okay, well, we can help with that. We'll be the support arm behind that. And so we did write that grant, and it was accepted. They got $5,000 to use to buy equipment, buy materials, and so on. And so they came in, and they came in for the first game and went out through the parking lot, and they were so well received that rather than do 2 games, they decided to go ahead and work through the entire season. About midway through the season, we began to get more requests for help with the recycling, and so we manufactured some big colorful boards that we could sit in the parking lot, and they were really just receptacles that we would put boxes of trash bags in, and we even went as far as to put 2 different kinds of bags there, and we labeled one trash bags, we labeled the other recycling bags, and told folks, communicated to them that if they would be so good as to just separate their own trash and leave it in the parking lot, we'll pick it up the next day after the game. They don't have to do anything with it other than just leave it there, put it in 2 separate color bags. And we began to get a real and a dynamic response to this recycling. And so by the end of the year, we were making real headway. And the second year then, this past year, we partnered with Boiler Green Initiative again, and we told them, we said, you know, on Sunday mornings after football games, we hire student groups to come in and clean up all our trash from the football games. We have about 250 to 300 students that do that. And within about a 3-hour period, we have the entire stadium, all the parking areas, all the areas on campus that we use are cleaned, and you can't even tell there was a football game that has taken place the day before. And so we told the Boiler Green Initiative, I said, you know, if you would like to participate in that program, we have an idea that we think would work that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past. And with your group, because you're interested in the recycling piece, we would allow you to come in on Saturday evening after the game, and your group can go through the stadium. You can collect all the recyclables you want out of the stadium and just leave the rest of the trash. And you'll get your cleanup fees done on Saturday evening. You will get the bulk of the recyclables. They'll be out of our way and reduce the bulk of our trash by about a third to a half, because those plastic bottles and plastic cups, they fill up a lot of trash bags. And so we partnered with them that way. This past year, at the end of the year, we had collected over 46,000 pounds of recyclables. And it's a program that has worked extremely well for us just in the course of 2 years. And I really think that the debt of gratitude here is owed to the student group. They are the ones that drove the effort. They are the ones that came up with the idea. And I think that's something that could happen on any campus. I think there are student groups, in particular, young people are interested in this kind of thing, and it's something that could work just about anywhere. It's worked very well for us at Purdue, and we would intend to expand this even more this year. In the first 2 games, this past Saturday we collected over 7,000 pounds of recyclables just in the one football game. So it wasn't a full house. We expect the next few games to be even better. The other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit was the big construction project that we have going on at Purdue right now, the expansion and renovation of our basketball arena. It's a $100 million project. It's the largest project that Purdue University has ever done, not just in athletics, but the entire university. Largest single construction project we've ever had. As we went into that project, we had discussions early on about whether or not we might be able to make this a LEED certified project. And as all of you know who have anything to do with athletics, it becomes an extremely budget-driven effort every time you have a construction project. You really have limited budgets and so on. Our construction management firm was telling us that if you want to go to LEED, it's a wonderful goal. It's a magnificent effort, but you will increase your budget considerably in order to make those marks. So we made a decision early on that we were not going to try to make the project LEED certified. However, we did mandate that where we could, we wanted to use sustainable products, use things like energy-saving features and all that kind of thing to the extent that we could to enhance the project. We used ideas such as reuse. We had to move football fields, parking lots, all kinds of things. We recycled the topsoil off the football field. We used drip irrigation in the landscaping rather than standard irrigation features. We used transformers with biodegradable fluids in them, all those kinds of things which don't have a huge budget impact in terms of increasing budget, but they are sustainable features. In discussions with other campus people, though, that deal with facilities, and I think this goes back to something that Paige was talking about earlier in terms of communication. As we had met with other project managers on campus and individuals in the university architect's office, we came across a project that the university had on their books dealing with a different way to handle stormwater runoff on campus. And they had wanted to create a large underground filtration bed. Some of you may know Purdue University basically sits at the edge of the Wabash River. And a lot of the stormwater utilities, a lot of the stormwater drain lines and so on go to the Wabash River. And we're trying to figure out ways where we can hold that water up, allow it to filter through the ground and so on, rather than flushing directly into a drain and going to the river. So the university had this idea, this project on their books where they wanted to build a large underground filtration bed. Well, naturally in athletics, we have some pretty large parking lots. And north of our football stadium, we have about 10 to 11 acres of asphalt parking in that area. As we begin to look at that project they had, the footprint for the filtration bed pretty well matched up with 2 new football practice fields that we were going to build. And so as we began to talk about that, we thought, wouldn't it be neat if we could combine those 2 projects, combine the excavation effort, the excavation cost to do the project, actually put that filtration bed underneath the football practice fields and build the fields right on top of that. And so we got the 2 engineering groups together, the engineering group for their project, the engineering group for our project, our field designers. You know, they worked very hard for a period of about 2 or 3 weeks and came up with a way to combine those projects. Order of magnitude savings for athletics on the excavation that was done for the fields and the building of the fields was over $300,000. Nothing to sneeze at, for sure. A huge savings for us. They put a filtration bed in there that will accept a full 1 inch of rain for an hour, draining off those 11 acres of asphalt parking lots, over 350,000 gallons of water that can be retained in a field, out of sight, underground, allowed to leach into the soil, clean that storm water, and never go to the river. Had we not been just having conversations and talking with the University Architect's Office, physical facilities folks, we would never have known that they were even thinking about a project like that. It really emphasizes the need for communication from one side of campus to the other. Thanks. Bill?
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk just a little bit about facilities, since that's what my focus tends to be as an architect. I get the opportunity to work with numerous institutions, both the University Architects' offices, the facility folks, as well as administration and even academics, and sort of interface with all of them to develop our projects. I thought I'd share a few projects today just to give you a smattering of the kind of sustainable things that we're trying to do as a practice. We're doing some work across the country right now and have had the opportunity to work on projects that are in fact heading towards LEED certification, and we also have some projects that we're doing exactly what Steve was just describing, where we were focused on sustainable practices. So I thought I'd just start with one project that we're doing down at Duke University. This is the Wallace Wade Stadium Improvements Project. Duke University has embraced LEED certification to a fairly high level. They have some 28, 29 different buildings that are LEED certified on their campus. But when it comes to athletics, the drive towards LEED certification is still there, but it's not as strong as when they're doing an academic project, because as Steve mentioned, obviously dollars become very important. They're privately funded dollars in many cases. Duke being a private university, it's always privately funded, but they tend to have a little different approach to making sure those dollars get extended as far as possible. So we developed a sort of a master plan for the reuse of this 1929 sort of horseshoe bowl stadium, and with that developed a whole series of new buildings that were going to be sort of at the top of the stadium, where we're going to be putting in restrooms and concession buildings and a peristyle and a ticket building and various other kinds of elements, even integrating a small rose garden. They're the only place that's hosted the Rose Bowl other than Pasadena in the country. When the war broke out, they offered to host the game there, and so we get the opportunity to use Pasadena roses in a rose garden, which is sort of a fun little sidelight. But nevertheless, what we've tried to do with the facilities themselves, and some of them are in fact under construction. You can see some of the design elements here relative to the green roofs and the overhangs and the shading and the various kinds of things that we're trying to provide with the overall master plan. And then as we've gotten into the various projects themselves, and these are some construction shots, of the place. You can see, kind of looking across the stadium, the new concession buildings and toilet facilities that are being added, as well as sort of the aerial view there. Each one of these bathrooms or toilet facilities contains over 100 fixtures, to give you a sense of scale. So there's, 4 of these are going to be finding their way around the campus, or around the stadium on the campus. And so sustainable practices get to be, really very important to think about. So one of the things that we've done is bring a lot of daylighting into the restroom facilities, where we actually have clear story lighting, so that we don't have to use as much artificial lighting on the inside of these facilities. We use natural ventilation rather than heating and cooling, sort of for obvious reasons. And then we also are using, low flow and dual flush fixtures and the proper kind of lighting that, reduced mercury fluorescent lamps and so forth, that start to really get these buildings towards a more sustainable approach. We initially wanted to have them have green roofs, but we ultimately opted for just the white membrane roofs that you see from the aerial view there. So even when you get into smaller kinds of projects, even though this is a very large renovation of the stadium, this is the first phase of just dealing with toilet facilities, you still can bring some of the sustainable practices to a project even like that. Different project completely up at Notre Dame. We've had the opportunity to do a number of football fields, and then we're in the throes right now of constructing a new soccer stadium, a new lacrosse stadium, and a new track and field stadium for athletics. The first project, this sort of view here encompasses all of the work except the track stadium, which is off screen here just due to sheer size. What we essentially are providing are separate venues for all of these different athletic sports. And Notre Dame University had decided that they didn't necessarily want to pursue this as a lead project, but they again wanted to pursue it with sustainable practices in mind. So we wanted to make sure that we went through sort of a lead checklist like we do on all of our projects as a firm, and found a few things that we certainly were able to do. With the soccer and lacrosse stadiums, the occupancy of these buildings is varied over the course of time during the year, and so there's not a real need to heat and cool every single space in these facilities. And so we were very specific about where we were going to introduce conditioned air and where we were not. We also have the various occupancy sensors and those kinds of elements, using some of the things that Steve just mentioned about transformers, and those kinds of components also are part of it. We did not get into the filtration and storm drainage that Steve just described at Purdue University, but certainly these fields have that kind of opportunity to act as a filtration medium for the stormwater collection on a campus. We know stormwater is a very big component, and university campuses, the more that they can do to embrace that and really take care of that, it can really obviously help clean up the aquifers that they're drawing, that we all are drawing from on a consistent basis. The project right now is soccer has opened. Lacrosse is going to be opening here in just another month or so. The football fields have been in use for a period of time as the football season has unfolded there. Obviously, with any project, we try to design it such that it works within the campus, not so much a sustainable thing, but a contextually related thing that it all fits together and just gives you a sense of what the buildings are going to look like. The last project that I wanted to focus on from an athletics standpoint was Colorado State University. We've been fortunate to do practice facilities all across the country for football and some basketball. And Colorado State engaged us to do both a basketball and a football facility. And you can see the renderings here, and you can see that it's a partial field from a football standpoint. One of the things that was really nice is that they really did, in fact, want to pursue this as a LEED certified project. And in fact, we are pursuing it as a gold level LEED certified project, which is really very commendable for them. Colorado, as you no doubt know, has a real propensity for sustainability and a real focus there as a state. and it clearly spills over to the institutions both at the University of Colorado and Colorado State. And we're actually dedicating this building this Friday. And with most of our practice facilities, we really strive for bringing lots of daylighting into the facilities so that we can reduce the amount of artificial lighting, and then really focus a lot of attention on the mechanical equipment because we're dealing with lots of volume and conditioning. We typically only heat the large practice space, and then with a basketball facility we actually have to heat and cool because of the wood floors in those facilities. But the thing that was nice about this project is we actually were able to get into some innovative design credits. For those of you that are familiar with the LEED checklist, sort of at the very bottom of it, there's an innovation and design category, and we were able to sort of look at 4 different components there where we've been able to achieve a higher level of water efficiency in the building. We've also been able to achieve a higher level of regional material use and recycled content in materials, as well as developing a very simple educational program where they're going to be giving tours to their facilities, as well as creating a website. And some of these things, as Steve said in his presentation, are very simple and don't really cost a lot of money. You know, to get a building certified at the basic level is really almost a no-cost option, other than having to pay for the fees to submit the project for its certification. The actual construction side of it is really quite modest, if at all. When you move to the silver level, you're only talking about 1% to 3%, and then as you move up the ladder to the gold level, it starts to ratchet up a little more, maybe 3% to 5%, and then the platinum being, you know, obviously beyond that. But really approaching it and thinking about getting that certificate and putting it on the wall, it can be very valuable. As we were discussing last evening over dinner, one of the things that we are noticing about college campuses is that they're becoming more attuned, and the students are becoming more attuned to whether that campus is in fact sustainably focused. And it really becomes important that that universities, and particularly athletics being the front porch of a university, starts to really embrace sustainability, so that it really becomes an important focus. And in many cases, students will make a choice for that university because it is sustainably focused, for one that may not be so much so is not falls from their list. Just to finish up, I wanted to just throw in one project that we're doing down at Duke University right now, which is a bit different, but is a building type that impacts athletics greatly, and that's a parking garage. Parking is a huge component of these facilities, and Duke University has embraced the idea of really focusing sustainable practices on their parking facilities, and we're actually trying to pursue, even though there's not a category for it with USGBC, we are actually trying to get this parking garage as the first parking garage only certified facility in the nation. And because we don't have any mechanical equipment to speak of in this building, it's very difficult to achieve that. But what we have been able to do is we've been able to sort of push the site points as well as the architectural points with the building. One of the things that is very important, you know, in a building down in North Carolina during the summer is it becomes a heat sink and it becomes very hot and humid down there. So we're actually, the university has allowed us to put shade structures on top of this parking facility where we're actually going to be shading the vehicles. Some of that on the perimeter is going to be shaded with green trellis, plants on trellises, and then the center is going to be just shaded with white membrane Teflon fabric. And then additionally, you know, we have a number of rain gardens that we've put around the building where we're capturing all of the site water and cleansing it before it goes back into the storm drainage system within the university campus itself. So I put this up here just because it's something for you as administrators and participants in the athletics world, as you start to have pressure on your land and ultimately start thinking about constructing structured parking, it too can be sustainable in the way it is designed. So with that, I'll turn things back to Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige and Steve and Bill. And before I begin our conversation, I just wanted to recognize two members of the NCAA staff who are in our audience, who've been very supportive of our work, Roberta Page and Jennifer Kearns, who are sitting there. I don't think I've missed anybody else. Mike King is in the back. Have I missed anybody from the NCAA? Okay. Well, I hope that what we've said thus far this morning provides some interesting points and opportunities for questions. And what I'd like to do is to just begin by asking if there are questions or comments or challenges that anyone in the group would like to pose to us. And if so, if you could tell me your name and your institution, and I'll repeat the question if I need to. Okay, thank you. A question from Jennifer at Michigan State, and it is, what are some of the things that institutions are doing with existing buildings, especially in athletics? So either Paige or Steve, if you have a comment.
Well, as we've worked on buildings in terms of renovation and so on, I think as Bill had indicated earlier, a lot of our focus goes to the lighting end of things. And try to use a lot of LED lighting, those types of lighting that move away from the mercury and so on. And so that is a focus for us, as well as water saving in terms of locker room areas, restrooms and so on, the automatic flush valves, low flow shower heads, those kinds of focuses.
Steve, are those projects that you do when the building comes up for renovation on whatever cycle it is, or are you able to move in front of the renovation cycle to make those changes?
We do both, Jeff. Certainly when we've got an actual renovation project going on, we'll do that, but we'll also do it in terms of our normal and routine maintenance. When we're replacing fixtures and so on, we'll move to those type of fixtures.
We do address the lighting issue as well, and what I've found on our campus is we have a kind of a habit with our people who open buildings. They come in and they turn on all the lights. They turn on every light, and I'm kind of on a one-person crusade in the building that I oversee to say we don't need to turn on all the lights all the time. And it sounds like a very simple thing, but you're really trying to work with a culture, and you're trying to break habits. And so it's one of those things where, you know, if I have to say it 5 times and then I have to say it a 6th time, I'm going to say it a 6th time. I'm going to say it in a way that's nice, because you got to make sure that you're working within the community. So the lighting is something that we constantly struggle with. It's also, another part of that is the heating and cooling. You don't necessarily, for us during the summer, we don't have students on campus, and you know, sometimes we're cooling buildings that we don't need to cool. And I think thanks to Carol and her work that you know, we've had some buildings that actually air conditioning has been turned off in the summer, displaced some staff and faculty to move to other locations on campus. Found that to be quite a cost savings.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. Steve?
Yeah, Jeff, I had one other thing I wanted to mention, because I think one of the things that is really noticeable in terms of athletics are the fields. And our turf superintendent has just recently began installation of a centralized irrigation control system that is all fed back to his primary turf building area. And all the irrigation systems then will be connected into that, where he can control that from his office from a laptop. And the reason it becomes important is because we think, I mean, we even notice it ourselves, when you drive around a campus, you may just have a rain shower, you may be in a rain shower, and you see an irrigation system come on. And you think, you know, what kind of sense does that make when you're in the middle of a rain to have irrigation on? And the centralized location allows him to control that all from one area, as opposed to what we've had for years, which is individual manually operated systems at every facility. Very labor intensive to try and get out there and do that. Really, I think a smart move on his part, and something that'll help us a lot in the long run.
I'm going to go back, front, there, just so everybody knows I'm seeing you. Sir.
We find that during the playing season, we have, as Jeff said, we have 21 sports. Not all of them play on fields. Some are in pools, some are on courts. But the ones that play on fields have very different needs. Our field hockey field needs to be cut to about 1.25 inches. Soccer is 1.5 inches. And football is a little bit longer than that. And so during the seasons, we need to make sure that we address those needs. But in the off season, they can all be cut at the same height. They don't need to be cut. In fact, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I do know that creating a good root structure in your field is really important. And overwatering hampers the growth of the root structure in your grass. So while we have irrigated fields, which is a really important part of being able to maintain our fields, you have to be careful not to overwater, because then once you get into the playing season, the root structure is not deep enough and you have divots all over the place. So I think that's one of the things that is what we've been able to address during the season and in the off season.
How do you work with your coaching staff that want to have that field in pristine condition, looking all the time, for field conditions, or candidates as they're bringing in that are playing a sport and want to see that field as it's going to be when they play on it? Is that...
Could you...
Dave's question is, if you've got recruits coming in the off season, the coach says, I want the field to look perfect, the way it's going to look the minute we start the season competitively. What do you say to the coach? And I think at our level, the pushback from coaches is probably not as great as it is maybe at the Division I level. However, there is pushback. And we have this with field hockey. It probably is our #1 concern, because that field is cut so short. And at times, depending on what the season is, it can look really, really bad based on when you cut it. My conversations with our coach basically are, look, take a picture of it when it's playing season so you can say, hey, this is how the field looks. Be able to talk in an educated way about what the field, care is, so that they understand. And I think most recruits are going to like that kind of a conversation, because that means you really care about your field. You really care about how it looks. So it's kind of a positive approach to something that maybe a coach would push back on. And it's an easy pushback for the coach, believe me. Yes. You. Yeah. So the question, just to make sure everybody heard it, from Duke was, given that Purdue is putting out recycling and trash bags available in the parking lots, are they still putting trash receptacles in concourses and other areas?
Yes, we didn't alter what we normally do with the trash containers and so on. We still have just as many trash containers as we had before. We still have them in the same locations, but the recyclable collection containers are in addition to that. They do look completely different so that they're easy to recognize. And when we put the big stations out in the parking lots that have the free bags in them, those are completely in addition to the trash receptacles that we already had. The thing that we found was with the regular trash receptacles, you can have hundreds, and it's not enough. People literally won't walk 30 feet to put their trash in a barrel. But if you allow them to get a free bag and they can take the bag right to their tailgate area, they'll put it in there and then they'll leave it set in that parking space when they leave. So it does make collection easier. It does kind of gather it together in one place rather than having loose items blowing all over the parking lot. So it does ease our effort somewhat on the following day when we're trying to clean up. But most of it is in addition to what we have always had and traditionally have and still have.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lydia Vandenberg. I'm with Penn State University, which has a big football program as well, and we've done great things with recycling. We're a new sustainability office, so we've started to work with facilities. We actually are part of facilities, so we've started to look at athletics. And my question to, I guess, all three of you is, you have all these different components of consumption, if you will. In terms of athletics, where do you see your biggest carbon footprint from athletics? Is it travel? Is it water? Is it, well, you know, not necessarily water, but lighting?
Could be water.
I look at the scoreboard that we have, and you know, they don't really have numbers to tell me, you know, how much energy that takes. And when we have recruits in, the scoreboard is on. Exactly what you're saying about, you know, having things looking nice for recruits. And we have actually a number of alumnus now saying, why is the scoreboard on all the time? So it's trying to look at that consumption piece. So you can speak to that. Great.
I'll start with that because I think at the Division III level, my answer is a pretty easy answer, and that is that 70% of our operating budget for athletics is travel.
Well, I think that was an easier answer than what I've got, because I really have to admit that I really don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, you know, when I think about the way we spend our money and so on, Purdue University is just now moving to a situation where rather than the individual departments just paying one large overhead charge back to the university, we're beginning to look at individual charges and metering for all the different buildings and facilities and being responsible for that. And when I see the utility charges for electricity, for you know, the steam that's generated through the university power plants and so on, they're huge numbers. And so I almost think that in the construction end of things, Bill might be able to have a better answer to that than even Paige or I, because he's on the front end of a lot of that thing. So I think, you know, maybe Bill can respond.
Yeah, certainly, you know, buildings use, you know, so much of the energy that we generate. So, you know, there's figures out there that talk about 75% of the energy usage is in buildings. And when you start to focus in on that number, and not all of the athletic facilities are indoor facilities, but you start to really appreciate the impact that you can have with your buildings or your facilities relative to the utility points that Steve just made. There is no doubt that if we all started to be smarter about how our buildings are mechanically treated from the air standpoint and electrically handled from the lighting standpoint and heating and cooling, that in itself can make a gigantic difference. When you then focus in on even taking it to, you know, materiality and regional use of materials and, you know, and straight on down the line, and sensitivity towards how the site is being handled and the stormwater is being handled. Those are the things that are going to have, I think, the largest impact. There is no doubt that travel and programming of these facilities is a big part of it, and it needs to be looked at. But certainly the constructability of these buildings, if you can start out dealing with sustainability at that level, that's going to be the very best. And even whether it's a renovated facility like you're talking about up in Michigan State, if you can get the attitude of everyone involved, whether it's athletics or administration or facilities or university architect's office, everybody can start to beat the same drum, it'll have a huge impact over time for the campus.
And I would add 3 pieces to that. I was director of the Ivy League for a long time. We had 33 championship sports and probably 9,000 athletes at any one time. I don't know if these were our biggest, but they might be our least visible carbon footprints. One is the travel of recruits to campus. We're national institutions, as Penn State is, as Michigan State is, as many institutions in this room are, and with 33 sports, we're in addition to the young people who are coming in for admissions tours and are also athletes, there are lots of people who are coming to summer camps, in part so they'll get better, in part because we want them to like our facilities and get better at our facilities instead of somewhere else in high school, and they're making recruiting trips. Some of them are under NCAA rules trips that the institutions pay for. Some of them are trips that students and the families are paying for, so you may have someone who visits your campus 500 miles away 4 or 5 times before they make a decision. The more sports you have, the bigger that is. The other side of it is our coaches are going out, and your coaches are going out, and even in Division III, Pacific Lutheran's coaches are going out and trying to see young people earlier and earlier in their secondary school careers and at summer camps and talking to them and their families. They're either doing that, if they're doing that locally, then hopefully their institution has been able to find energy efficient vehicles. If you're flying from A to B and renting a car, it's almost certain that that car is not going to be very energy efficient because the car companies don't seem to be doing much there. And the little verb I had in there, if you're flying, speaks for itself. And then the third, I think, invisible piece is the incredible amount of energy that we use, electronic energy that we use in recruiting when we're online. You're looking at material that kids are sending you online, at things from coaches. You're looking at scouting services. You're looking at film. You're at a remote location and you're on your iPhone checking your email. You're doing all this stuff, which we now all take for granted, and it uses a tremendous amount of energy. And compared to 20 years ago, we were flying and driving, but we were not, and recruits were coming in, but we were not looking down at some console 15 hours a day while we were recruiting, and we're certainly all doing that now. I have something to say, but why don't you?
We were talking last night about this very subject, actually, and one of the things that I mentioned on our campus is our Greek living units have what they call energy wars, and we found that to be again. I remember when I said that it was an honor for me to be here, and I'm not an expert. Okay, all I can say is that it's been very well received by our students. They take it very seriously, and they feel very honored if they actually win the energy war. And I'd have to defer to my colleagues at DePauw, but I know that they are able to measure certain uses of energy, and it's very much along the lines of what you're saying. It's that competitiveness. It's a challenge. It also is something that they can say, hey, we won the energy war. And so that's attractive to a certain type of student, and that means that they're going to attract students to their living unit, which is a real positive thing. So that's something that we're actually doing on our campus. And after the session's over, I'm sure that Carol or Missy would be happy to talk to you.
I have something I could maybe add to that. My name is Catherine Cushing. I'm from San Jose State, and we're trying to do exactly the same thing with some of our student athletes. So we're asking everybody on our campus, all 33,000 students, faculty, and
I could add to that, you're absolutely right. You're both absolutely right that the competitive instinct in student athletes is very obvious, and they will want to win, but they'll also want to excel, which is a little different. They really will want to try and get it right. And I know at the national level, the NCAA has national student athlete advisory committees in each of the 3 divisions, and those 3 committees over the last 2 years have more enthusiasm for pushing the green team, pushing NCAA associational activities to be green, have more enthusiasm and energy for that than for anything else that's on their agenda. And they've helped shape some of the things that we're going to try and do in the January NCAA convention. 2 things I would add. At the institutional level, one of the things that schools in my league, especially at Columbia, found were useful generally. Columbia has a program in which teams get points for a variety of non-athletic and athletic achievements over the course of the year, including GPAs and community service and winning a league championship. And one of the components for that is some kind of structured environmental activity, whether it's a team activity or the sum total of individual activities. That's a very intense competition at Columbia, and the green part of it is a very popular way. And you're kind of unpopular as a Columbia team if you don't get the full green points, because it's such a good thing to do, and it's not very hard to do in New York. There's lots of opportunities. So one way to do that is to get the athletic department, if it doesn't have that kind of program, to think about that kind of awards program. And the other piece is to use athletic conferences. And I'm a former commissioner, and I know how much commissioners don't like to hear, gee, we have something else for you to do besides getting the competitions done right. But commissioners and leagues are increasingly thinking about how to add some kind of green competition to the awards programs that they have for their leagues, for student athletes, for teams, and for coaches. And it's a very popular approach. One of the challenges for the NCAA Green Team is for us to work with the conference commissioners and try and create some templates that they can adapt and use to do just that. And if we're successful, we'll be helping our athletes to get more involved and to be leaders in that way. Yes?
Two questions for you in terms of, one is, how is the NCAA using its clout with all the venues that you pick around the country in terms of facilities that have sustainable practices or not? And then number 2, in terms of not only are the teams traveling, so I'm from the Northwest Conference also, but we've got all the ADs meeting several times a year, traveling all over the place. We've got all the coaches meeting, traveling all over the place to get together. So is that a commissioner's decision, or is that...
Great question.
So is video conferencing something that we can cut down in terms of all the travel?
Great questions. Let me take the second one first. The NCAA, in terms of the meetings that we control, that the NCAA controls, I think has done a very good job in trying to move meetings to video conference or to phone, to put materials online rather than through paper. If there is paper and you get it in the mail, you're not going to get it again when you go to the live meeting. And to really find a different balance between live meetings and non-live meetings. And you know what the issue is. You want, as people come on and off groups, you need group identity, you need people to learn to work together, but you can't have us flying all over the world. And one of the things we talked about last night was, this goes to the site piece of it, in women's basketball, in talking about potential site bids for the women's basketball championship. This year, instead of doing 6 live presentations at 6 different cities, the women's basketball staff did 1 simultaneous video conference with all 6 cities. And so not only did we save all that travel and carbon and time and money, but we did a better job because the questions from each group were part of one common conversation, and everybody got to learn from each other. So I think the NCAA is trying hard. We would not say that we've done everything there is to do, but I think we've made a good start. The coaches groups and the athletic director groups and the commissioner groups are actually all separate, and they control their own meetings. I can tell you that the Division I commissioners really struggle with needing to be together to kind of develop trust. We have 6 new commissioners out of 32 this year, so they need to get to know each other on the one hand. And on the other hand, I think there's a feeling that not all the live meetings the commissioners have need to be live. So the coach groups try to meet at the national tournaments for their national championships for their sports, and those are events they would be attending anyway. At the conference level, in our conference, we've tried to say to our coach groups, either meet at your national conference when you're going to meet anyway, or meet by phone, or meet once instead of twice. I felt as a commissioner that it was important for my coaches to look each other in the eye once a year when they were not competing, preferably before they competed, and make sure that we knew what we were going to do over the year and that was going to work well, but that the postseason meeting didn't necessarily have to be in person if the season had gone well. So I think there is a lot that can be done there. But the national coaches groups have their own controls. In terms of NCAA championship sites, I think we would say that we're just starting and that there's a lot we can do. We're hoping over the course of this year to be able to pick a championship, one championship, and do it really well in green terms and see what we learn from that and see what kind of an example we can present that as, and to, over the course of the year, to do a better job of finding out what our conferences are doing in terms of running green championships so that we can get better. And our ultimate goal is to make these championships green, to put green elements in our bid specs so that when we go to a city and they want to bid on doesn't matter what level or what sport, there's a very clear set of green components, and to use that information, again, to go back to the conferences and say, here's some information you can use. But we're just, it's very clear to us that we're just beginning that process. It's a great opportunity that we have not yet completely, not yet fulfilled, but we know it's there. Yes?
Well, at Purdue, just 2 years ago, we named a university sustainability leader, and then to follow that, they came back through all the individual programmatic areas in the university and asked them to name a sustainability officer in their departments. I happen to serve as the sustainability contact for athletics at Purdue, but every other university programmatic area also has a sustainability person that is in charge of things that are going on in their department. So should you invest in that? I don't know if I can answer that. I can tell you that this is pretty new throughout most of the athletic departments, I think, in the country, and it's something that we're all just kind of putting our toe in the water to test what's going on and how we approach this. So even at a university of our size, we've only been doing this for a couple of years.
I think at DePauw, we're a smaller liberal arts school, and as I said in my opening remarks, I really feel like communication is very important. And as the athletics director, it's really important to me that I'm viewed as a person that is open, that I will listen, particularly as we talk about sustainability, and making sure that there's no lines drawn in the sand, that we're all working together as an institution, whether that means we appoint someone in our athletic staff as a point person, that could be. We have a person that is a liaison to admissions. We have a person that's a liaison to student life in some ways. So, I mean, I think you can go that direction, but I really feel like it has to come from the top. And the athletics director has to be someone who's viewed as someone who is open, someone who is willing to listen, and I think that's going to go a long way with, as I said earlier, making sure that those silos aren't created.
I can tell you at my schools, if our 8 provosts came to our 8 athletic directors and said, we're going to pay for someone who can help you get done what we think you want to do anyway, that person would be hired by noon, and it's almost 11:30. So I think that's a great idea, and in these tight budget times, I think people would be very enthusiastic. I do think that at the same time, people don't want to lose sight of what Paige has said, which is that they want to make clear to their administrations that they would not view that as a substitute for the athletic department caring and being involved up and down. But having someone who could really help get that stuff done would be wonderful. Just wonderful. I'm sorry. Sure. Well, why don't we do both of you, and then I think we have time for one more question. So, go ahead. And I'll be back. I'll be back. That's a very important and useful comment. Thank you. Yes?
I don't know that we have done a specific study to determine whether artificial all play surfaces are more sustainable than natural grass or turf fields. Certainly, we know both contribute significantly to the stormwater runoff component, and really we focused a lot of attention on how to start dealing with that with both fields. Now, as far as the energy to manufacture, compared to the pesticides and care, I think that's a very good question. I don't have the answer for that. I suspect it's out there, and could do a little research and maybe get back to you on that. But certainly focusing a lot of effort, like Purdue has, on the stormwater opportunity that exists with these big athletic surfaces and parking areas is maybe an area to really focus a fair amount of attention first. Certainly understanding the whole energy line for the product is clearly important, but there's at least more flexibility with the natural turf field relative to what Paige was just describing relative to its maintenance, so that you could cause the care to go up and down relative to its use for the artificial field, once it's done and manufactured, it's pretty well done. You have to deal with some of the rubber and some of the things from time to time. But so it'd be an interesting study, but I don't have the specifics on that.
As to the travel, I think there are 3 or 4 answers I can give real briefly. The NCAA does pay attention to travel in the national championships when it does seeding and travel across the country, and that's something you're trying to reconcile with a legitimate seeding of 1 in 64, 2 in 63, and so forth. One of the things the NCAA has done is if you have someone who's going to wind up in the East Regional of the basketball tournament, but the 2 teams actually happen to be in the West, they'll play their first round games at a Western site. They're still in the Eastern bracket, but they're at the Western site. And so a couple years ago, you may remember Maryland and Georgetown traveled across the country in planes that were probably drag racing at 35,000 feet to play in Idaho. And we looked at that and said, that doesn't make any sense. So there is, I think, very good attention to that, again, at every level. And there have been some attempts in the individual sports like track and field to change the qualifying structure so that there is, in fact, less travel by the individual athletes and their coaches. At the conference level, the most important thing you can do, I think, is to think about, instead of having your league schedule be Wednesday, Saturday, or Wednesday, Sunday, is to have a schedule where you play Saturday, Sunday. You're either home, or Friday, Saturday. You're home both those days, or you're away both those days. The Ivy League has done that for a long time, and it has the added benefit of clearing out the week for the student athlete. If you're not on the road at all that week, that's a very different academic week. We're a conference where people could travel on the ground between our 2 furthest schools, and so that kind of travel was feasible. If you're in a conference where or you're away both those days. The Ivy League has done that for a long time, and it has the added benefit of clearing out the week for the student athlete. If you're not on the road at all that week, that's a very different academic week. We're a conference where people could travel on the ground between our 2 furthest schools, and so that kind of travel was feasible. If you're in a conference where it's Division I conference, athletes feel that they're, but it can be, depending on the sport, it can be the right answer. So I think people are trying to pursue that. And as Paige mentioned, sometimes it's a culture change. Sometimes you have to say, being the only game that night, but there's some other benefits and some other reasons, and we'll work with you on the marketing and on the attendance so that you come out feeling right about it. So I think the short answer is people are conscious of the travel issues, and are trying to do them, but it's not simple. Yes? Well, I'll give the NCAA answer, which is not yet, because we're not yet doing everything we want to do. But it's on our list of things to try and get done. I don't know whether either your institutions or your conferences have done that.
Just to let you know, like the organization, just gasoline through their credit card, they'll give you 4 cents to the gallon back to whatever the program you have. All the airlines, travel agents, whatever, it's a very easy program. We in the interface would be happy to share with you that information, how we do it, so that it can be easy for you, because it's not a complicated issue. But I think it can solve, at least in the short term, at the very front area, doing something as opposed to sitting around trying to evaluate. So just want to let you know we're in that.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, if there is another question. Back to the future.
Michigan State
video board to PSAs with regard to the recycling.
One of the things we talked about at dinner last night was how to do that communicating, how to make clear to people what the benefits have been. And the example we used was when Steve's football practice and drainage facility is done, no one will know about it. The water's invisible. The water that's not going into the river is invisible. So unless there's some sign or something, whether it's an athletic, that one of the we've done before, we can see what thought has gone into and what the savings have been. Someone mentioned earlier doing facility. Think about, since people love to go through athletic facilities for different reasons. So that's a great question. And at least in the NCAA group, we're just beginning to think about how to do that at our convention, how to do that at our championships, how to highlight whatever it is that we get done. My panelists, co-panelists, and I would like to thank you all very much for your interest and enthusiasm and participation. And we've learned a lot to take back to our athletics colleagues. We hope you've learned something as well. And any of us would love to hear from you. I think our bios are in the program, I believe, but if any of you have questions or comments, my email is jorleans@princeton.edu, and I will do my best to answer or get you might want to send. And so thank you very much.